I'm Shell, a modest office worker at a medium-sized company. I met my husband Kyler through work 2 years ago, and we hit it off right away. We started dating without knowing much about each other, but we had a good time. We made time for dates and gradually got to know each other better. I couldn't deny that I started to see him as a good person. He was kind and gentle, always attentive to my needs and concerns. I felt like I could be happy with him. We didn't take long to feel this way, and he proposed after just 4 months of dating. Thanks to a stable job at a big corporation, the engagement ring he gave me had a sparkling diamond that left me mesmerized. I accepted his proposal, and we quickly found a place to live together and started planning our wedding. I was looking forward to a grand wedding, but Kyler wanted to keep it small. In the end, we had a modest ceremony with just close family and friends. It's been almost 3 years since we started living together. I'm now 26, still working, and we don't have kids yet. I wanted to work a bit more, and Kyler wasn't keen on having kids either. Well, I took it positively, thinking it just meant more time for the two of us. But I was starting to want a child, as we were about to celebrate our 3rd Thanksgiving together. Hey, Thanksgiving is coming up. What should we do? I asked Kyler, who was engrossed in his phone. He gave a non-committal H and said nothing more. I'd like to see your family soon, I continued, a bit annoyed at his lack of response. I have work, he finally said, looking up from his phone. But you haven't been back home in ages, I pointed out. I hadn't seen my in-laws since the wedding 2 years ago. Every time a long holiday came up, I'd suggest going home, but Kyler would insist he had work. I even offered to go alone, but he opposed it, saying it would be awkward for me and that his sister didn't like me for some reason. So I couldn't just go to his family's home. He wouldn't even give me their phone number, saying he'd handle it. Well, it wasn't like I wouldn't be able to see her forever, so I decided I'd get her contact info when I saw her someday. Is Thanksgiving a work day for you? What about Christmas? At a normal workplace, Thanksgiving and Christmas would be days off, but my husband's workplace doesn't always have holidays. Although Saturdays and Sundays are technically days off for him. We haven't had many dates since getting married due to his entertainment dinners and sudden business trips. Not sure about Christmas, he replied, going back to his phone. And so I decided to spend Thanksgiving and Christmas at my parents' home. I met up with my friend Diana, who asked me something troubling. What do you think about men cheating? Diana wasn't married yet, but it seemed like something was up with her boyfriend. She asked me in a rather displeased manner. Cheating? Did something happen? He's always on his phone. He even brings his phone when he showers. Isn't that weird? That made me think. Kyler was always on his phone at home too. Even when he'd go take showers, he'd bring it along like a pet. I didn't really care, as it had been the case since we got married. But when I heard Diana's story, I was taken aback. Is that suspicious? Of course. He's got his passcode set too. I would want to see, but I'm hesitant to. I couldn't say anything as I was in the same situation. In fact, I started to worry that Kyler might be cheating too. I couldn't relax at my parents' home after that and thought about going home early. But Kyler wouldn't be there anyway, so I stayed at my parents' home feeling uneasy and returned home as planned. Hey Kyler, what are you always doing on your phone? I asked him as soon as I got home. He was on his phone again, but looked a bit flustered at my question and put his phone in his pocket. I get a lot of work-related messages. I'm leading a major project, and I can't afford to be away from my phone. I always thought my husband would never lie to me, but lately something just didn't feel right. He kept saying he was busy with work, but I couldn't help but question everything he did and said. The faint scent that lingered around him was one red flag. He usually got home late around 11 p.m. and often said he was entertaining clients or working overtime. Yet, every so often, I'd catch a sweet smell coming off his suit, like a women's perfume. I don't wear perfume myself, so I'm not an expert, but it smelled like something a younger woman would wear. As I took his suit jacket to hang it up, there it was again, a sweet scent. I could confront him right there, but I didn't have any concrete evidence. Afraid of making him dislike me, I suppressed the growing doubts and worries in my mind. But then an opportunity came along. He forgot his phone on the dining table while showering. As I sipped my homemade herbal tea, I glanced at his phone. It'd be easy to look now, but if he found out, he could lose trust in me. I was torn. I wanted to clear my suspicions, but if he really was cheating, I may not recover from the shock. Various thoughts flooded my mind as I looked at that phone. Suddenly, it buzzed with a notification. Startled, I took a peek. It was just a message alert, but the content wasn't displayed. I couldn't see the content because he said it so it doesn't show up. I reached for his phone, making sure he had not come out of the shower yet. I held my breath as I moved my fingers to open the phone, but it was locked. Of course, everybody locked their phone. I was annoyed, but also relieved as I went to the phone back then. It buzzed again, this time an incoming call. The screen read, Gabriella. Who was Gabriella? I didn't recognize the name, but I knew I could still answer it even though it was locked. I naturally slid my finger across the screen and put the phone to my ear. Hello, Kyler? Is this a good time? The voice on the other end was a young woman. I got even more nervous. Kyler's in the shower right now. What? Who is this? I told her he couldn't talk, and her voice changed. It got lower and colder. I'm his wife. This is not good. She hung up after saying just that. What did not good mean? I put the phone back on the table. It was clear he was cheating, and probably with Gabriella. But I didn't have proof to confront him. I looked at his phone on the table, pondering. What did this mean for me? More importantly, what's the right thing to do? Should I get angry? Should I cry? Should I pretend I don't know? No, pretending is off the table now. I did answer the phone after all. Oh, there it is, lost in thought. I didn't notice him come out of the shower. I caught my husband reaching for his phone and looked at him. Was he checking something or typing a message? It was hard to say. Gabriella called. When he heard this, he stopped what he was doing and looked at me. Oh, did she? The moment our eyes met, he averted his gaze and started fiddling with his phone again. Normally, he'd sit next to me after a shower to have a beer, but not this time. He seemed like he was about to leave. Wait, can we talk for a second? I stopped him with a smile and gestured for him to sit. What about? He stayed put, but didn't come closer. Who's Gabriella? A co-worker? I bet she's cute. She sounds like it from her voice. Hearing this, he turned his surprised eyes toward me. How would you know? I answered the phone. What? As I continued speaking cheerfully, his expression transitioned from surprise to what looked like anger. He stepped towards me and pulled my hand. What's the big idea answering my call like that? I had never heard my husband raise his voice like that before. Though taken aback by his sudden change, I knew I couldn't back down. I stood up, looked him in the eye, and asked, What's your relationship with this Gabriella person? We've never had a fight since we met. Maybe that's why he looked surprised for a moment. She's just a co-worker. His voice softened and he sat down on a nearby chair. I sat back down too. I couldn't press him further. At this point, I'd have to gather evidence later. Just then, his phone rang again. Another call. I asked, noticing his troubled expression as he looked at the screen. He nodded and started to get up, but I grabbed his hand. Answer it on speaker here. If it's work-related, you can turn off the speaker. I suspected it was Gabriella again. I instructed him to let me hear the voice and content. He sat back down and reluctantly answered the call. Kyler, what was that message about? The voice from the speaker was his mother's. So it was his mom. I felt a bit relieved, but he didn't respond, his face turning pale. I nudged him to continue the conversation, but he remained silent. Are you listening? What's this about Rel being dad? Tell us where to go. Your father and I are coming to see you right now. His mother raised her voice, frustrated by his silence. I was shocked. What's going on? I'm right here. I looked at my husband, who was trembling, gripping his phone. I'm alive. A moment of silence followed. What, Relly? What's going on? His mother sounded just as confused. I was equally puzzled. Why did she think I was dead? What's going on? Kyler texted me saying you passed away and that he'd handle the funeral alone and that I didn't need to show up. This made no sense. Was it a spam text or something? I briefly thought, but Kyler's trembling suggested he actually did contact his mother. "I'm coming over tomorrow." His mother, still confused but seeing no other way to proceed, hung up. I asked my husband for an explanation, but he said nothing. Fortunately, it was still Thanksgiving break, so I was going to be home. I didn't know he was working, but I told him to take a sick day if he had to, and I went to our bedroom. He didn't come to the room that night, and it seemed like he slept on the couch. The next morning, I woke him up and made breakfast. As usual, we waited for his mother. He didn't say a word and looked scared the whole time. He didn't touch his phone either. I didn't bring up his behavior and quietly waited. Around noon, his mother arrived. Tyler's father was with her, carrying lots of bags. I greeted my in-laws warmly, and they reciprocated with smiles, handing me the bags and explaining there were gifts. There were homemade treats from his mother, famous sweets from a local shop, and lots of cakes. We chatted about trivial things for a while, but Kyler didn't join in, shrinking in a corner. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I made tea for my in-laws, pulled my husband by his shirt to sit next to me, and sat down. "What's going on, Kyler?" My father-in-law finally broke the awkward silence, looking exasperated at my husband and me. My husband flinched at his voice, lifting his downcast face to look at him, but he quickly looked down again, as if terrified by his father's expression. "Spit it out," my father-in-law raised his voice, and my husband started to explain in a shaky voice. Based on my husband's account, he met Gabrielle through work shortly after we got married. Initially, they were just colleagues, but things changed when they started working closely on a project. Gabrielle confessed her feelings for him. He told her he was married, but she was okay with it, so they started dating. They were together for a little over 2 years. He said all this happened shortly after we got married. At first, he thought it was just a fling, but he started to fall for Gabrielle. He considered divorcing me to marry her, but realized he'd have to pay a hefty settlement if he admitted to cheating. So he tried to make my in-laws dislike me, thinking I'd initiate the divorce. He even spread rumors about me to my in-laws and his sister, but my in-laws never showed any signs of disliking me, and I didn't seem to be bothered by it. So he thought about cutting ties with me and paying the settlement. So he told his parents that I had passed away. My in-laws and I were dumbfounded by his foolishness. "You're unbelievable. I'm so sorry, Relly, about our poor son." My mother-in-law apologized, holding back tears. I told her to look up, and then she looked at my husband. Kyler was visibly shaking, his face pale. "If you're willing to pay the settlement, I'm okay with the divorce," I told him, smiling. At that moment, my father-in-law landed a punch on my husband's head. "You idiot! Break up with her right now. You've lost your freedom. Go home." My husband was too stunned to resist. Kyler was frightened by my father-in-law's furious behavior, and it looked like he was about to burst into tears. I couldn't help but laugh a little. "We'll take responsibility for the settlement," my mother-in-law said, tears streaming down her face. I wrapped my arms around her and smiled at her. "Don't worry about it," I reassured her. After hearing all this, staying together seemed foolish. "I have a job and we don't have kids. I'm sorry I couldn't be a better wife," I said to my mother-in-law. After hearing about my husband and immediately losing interest, my in-laws apologized to me over and over again and left the house, dragging my reluctant husband. We divorced shortly after. I claimed a hefty settlement and kept the house. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was my sister-in-law. Apparently, she had also been misled by Kyler, and that was why she never tried to get to know me. It turned out both my sister-in-law and I had no hard feelings about each other ever, and she wanted to reach out to me. She wanted to be friends, even though we were no longer sisters by marriage. She said she wanted to meet up. So I agreed to meet with her and ended the call. A few days later, I saw my sister-in-law for the first time since the wedding. We both were happy to catch up, and we quickly became comfortable with each other. After chatting and hanging out, from that day on, we stayed in touch and became good friends. She even filled me in on my ex-husband's situation. Apparently, Gabrielle had no intention of marrying him. She was just using him for financial support. When I found out, she started making plans to cut ties with him, and apparently she dumped him pretty quickly. He had to quit his job when he moved back in with his parents, and now Kyler's doing manual labor. which he despises under his father's strict supervision. Hearing all this lifted my spirits. My sister-in-law was probably worried about me, even as she shared this with a smile. I laughed along and told her not to worry, as they planned to keep him under even stricter training. I've learned to be more cautious in choosing a life partner after going through a divorce, I told my sister-in-law. That's all good now, as this experience has led to a positive outcome.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.